What is going on, you guys? Admiral Tori here, and welcome aboard for another World of Warships video on my channel. In today's video, I want to talk to you guys about how I truly feel about aircraft carriers, and at the end of this video, I'm going to make a big statement that might affect my channel at the same time. So first things first, let's talk about how I truly feel about aircraft carriers and why I'm doing a video about this and not on battleships, cruisers, or destroyers. All the time, all the effort that I put into playing the Japanese and the American carriers, I start to realize that I'm not having fun with aircraft carriers. And after that, playing through tier 9 on the USN line, tier 8 on the Japanese line, I start to think to myself, what have I experienced on aircraft carriers and why I'm even playing aircraft carriers. Aircraft carriers offers a completely different experience from battleships, destroyers, and cruisers because aircraft carrier is the only ship in this game that offers RTS style gameplay, while the other types of ships are third-person shooting or third-person dropping torpedoes. With aircraft carriers, I began to play aircraft carriers because I was really inspired to look at aircraft carriers, since aircraft carriers were a major role in the Pacific conflict. And you guys know me, I love to read about history. I love to play games that are historically somewhat fictional or somewhat related to some sort of history. I'm looking forward to playing future games that deals with history, especially during the World War II period. And one of the ships that happens to be a big player in the Pacific theater are aircraft carriers. And after that, I decided to learn to play aircraft carriers. It was a huge learning curve to learn how to play the Japanese carrier and also the USN carriers. And after that, when I play the Japanese and the USN carriers all the way to tier 7, both tech tree line, I start to enjoy playing aircraft carriers because, like I said, it offers a different experience. It caught my interest because they are historically significant during the Pacific theater or even the Atlantic or European front because of their experience and what they have done during World War II. And I'm always looking forward to do videos about history. So why am I here to talk about aircraft carriers, and why am I stopping myself from playing aircraft carriers? All I can say is that enough is enough, because from all the ships I have played, the battleships, cruisers, and my little experience with destroyers so far, aircraft carriers by far was my worst experience on World of Warships, and I cannot believe that I made it to tier 9 on the USN tech tree line and tier 8 on the Japanese. Now I'm about to unlock the Taiho on the Japanese after getting 20k of XP on the Shokaku, and then I will officially get a tier 9 carrier on the Japanese. I have almost 2 tier 9s in the aircraft carrier category, and here I am, out of the blue, telling you guys that I'm gonna stop playing aircraft carriers because I had enough. The reason why I had enough is because, one, I'm not gonna even get into details because getting into details, I guarantee that it's gonna take a solid 2 hours, maybe 3 hours, more than 1 hour for sure, about all the problems I have encountered with aircraft carriers. I feel that Wargaming hasn't put enough attention to aircraft carriers because there is a lack of aircraft carrier players out there. If there was a big problem on battleships, cruisers, and destroyers, they'd probably fix it because there's much more cruisers, battleship, and destroyer players out there talking on the community forums about their problems. They talk about the Japanese destroyer torpedo, American battleship accuracy, cruisers capabilities, Mogamis, and you know, there's so many things are talking on the forums. But I feel that nobody cares about aircraft carriers. And when nobody shows any attention, Wargaming feels that they don't need to do anything about aircraft carriers. The only time they ever put their attention on aircraft carriers is when people complain about the problems with their balance. And I do agree, I strongly agree that aircraft carriers are a problem when it comes to balance. And then you start to begin to ask yourself, where do aircraft carriers stand in this game? What is their roles? What is their job? Most people will view aircraft carriers as a damage machine. After playing to tier 9 on the Japanese, the Americans, and almost to tier 9 on the Japanese carriers, I started to push away that idea that carriers are all about damage, because they're not anymore. I can do more damage in the battleship than an aircraft carrier nowadays. I start to feel that aircraft carriers are more of a useful utility to your team. And this is a very important part of this game. And when something is important and people don't put attention to it, you lost that importance, and then you start to realize the game is changing. And the game is completely different from back in the day when I started playing World of Warships to today because of the lack of aircraft carriers. And I don't know how many people realize this, but when there was less aircraft carriers, nowadays destroyers dominate the sea. There's much more torpedoes, and when there is more torpedoes in the water from destroyers, that means battleships are going to be playing much more far back because they don't want to get hit by torpedoes. And when cruisers get hit by torpedoes, they lose a lot of their HP, so they don't bother to even try to get near the cap. And now you're left with a game of destroyers. Destroyers are not the problem. Aircraft carriers are the problem. Aircraft carriers, from what I learned, is that they give you such a useful information about the enemy's location. I don't know how many of you guys realize this, but back in the day on Two Brothers, or back in the day when you play maps on standard battle, in most cases scenario, 80% of your game or 90% of your game, when you have that aircraft carrier in your game, you usually go towards the direction of the enemy, because the enemy aircraft carrier or your friendly aircraft carrier will direct your team or their team toward to both sides. Basically, they direct the fleet because they give you such crucial information of where the battleships are at, where all the destroyers are at, what you're dealing with, what kind of destroyer are they. Is it a gunboat? Is it a torpedo boat? Is it a Japanese destroyer? There's a Japanese destroyer near a battleship, so the battleship doesn't put himself in harm's way. Is there cruisers around? Is there anyone on the flags? Anyone on the smoke? We lost that. We completely lost that. And nowadays, when you get into higher tier matchmaking where there's less aircraft carriers, nobody wants to go in anymore. That's how I see it. That's how I view it, which is why I always complain about the high tier matchmaking, because I don't enjoy it at all. And you get those games where there's 4 flags captured and your team doesn't capture any flag because they don't want to push. You get those games on Two Brothers. Two Brothers is a perfect example. Standard battle. Let's stack one side. Your entire team stacks on the east side. The enemy team stacks on the west side. What did you get? Nobody shooting at each other until they realize that they stack aside, so they have to turn back and fight each other later half of the game. Or maybe you stack a quarter of your team on one side and you stack your rest of your team on the other side. The quarter team faces the entire fleet of the enemy team, get wiped out because they didn't know that the entire enemy fleet was on that side of the map, while your other side of your team is pushing forward, having trouble sometime pushing that other part of the side because some maybe destroyers are holding the line, or cruisers holding the line, battleship holding the line, and you lose the game. I don't know, but certainly I think aircraft carriers, ever since that they have lost their purpose in this game, the game has changed a lot. Because back in the day, when it was the fun days for me, in my opinion, battleships used to go in and brawl. Battleships, I mean, we're talking about battleships. Nowadays, when people mention the word battleship, they think of a ship sitting back at 15 to 23 kilometers trying to snipe somebody far away, and that person probably dodged the shell because you're trying to snipe someone far away. You can see the shells coming from them. Nowadays, that's what you get. Back in the day, believe it or not, I think that there were much more battleship engaged in battle from 8 kilometers to 15 kilometers on average, rather than being 15 to 20 kilometers. That's how I feel it. Cruisers are much more engaged onto the flags. Nowadays in the high tiers, you don't see that anymore. Destroyers. Japanese destroyers don't go into flag no more because they fear that there might be a gunboat. They don't know if there's a gunboat or not, because once they get caught by a Atlanta or they get caught by a American or Russian destroyer, they're pretty much screwed, and they have to use the smoke to get out of that situation. When you get in a game where there's Japanese destroyers on one side of the map and all your American destroyers on the other side of the map, how do the people know? Well, they find out after they realize that. So when that Japanese destroyers on the other side of the map, and the American destroyers who are hunting for Japanese destroyers are the ones to counter the Japanese destroyers, the one to help escort battleship against those Japanese destroyers, because Japanese destroyers are all about torpedoes. Those torpedoes, Japanese destroyers, gonna wreck the other side of the map until your friendly destroyers, who are American or Russian, come and help. There is a loss of balance in this game ever since aircraft carriers has left, and it's not to the point where the game is broken or not fun to play, but I can tell you right now, I feel that aircraft carriers has some sort of big role in this game as a utility ship, a ship that directs your fleet, a ship that gives you an idea where to go, and we have lost that. because not many people has taken the moment to look into aircraft carriers, and that is only part of the problem that I'm listing here. The biggest problem, the way I feel that about aircraft carriers, is that they haven't done much. They need to rebuild the entire carrier line. You can't just tweak the anti-air. You can't just change the loadout on aircraft carriers. You just can't do that. That is not enough to fix aircraft carriers. We want an aircraft carrier. I want an aircraft carrier tech tree line that had a good purpose, that receives reward for supporting your team, receive reward for doing things that allows your team to play much more engaging games. Games are less engaging in the higher tiers because of the lack of aircraft carriers. And it might be wrong. I might be wrong. Maybe it's not that reason. Maybe people got smarter that they don't want to go into the cap flag no more. Maybe battleships feel like that they should just engage at long distances. But I personally prefer back in the day when there were aircraft carriers. Now, arguably, back in the day, aircraft carriers were overpowered, and I can see that as an issue. Right now, aircraft carriers are seesawing back and forth on the balance. They're sometimes overpowered, they're sometimes underpowered, overpowered, underpowered. And if you can't find a solution to it, just start from scratch, rebuild the entire aircraft carrier mechanic, rebuild everything. Because when you play aircraft carriers right now, I feel that the RTS style, there's not much option. I feel that there's no refinements. The controls are clunky. For peak's sakes, like if you play an actual RTS game like Total War Shogun 2, which is one of the games I enjoy, they give you so much options of what you can do, while in this game, you're not given an option. And there's that Japanese and American balance issue. When I get in a game with an aircraft carrier, you know when it's bad in terms of balance, when it's predetermined that who's gonna win. I see a Japanese carrier. He has 3 torpedoes. I only have 1 torpedo. Guess what? Who's gonna win? The Japanese carrier, because he has 3 torpedoes. He's guaranteed to do more damage than me. I have a Japanese fighter, 1 squadron of fighter. I see an American fighter. He has 1 squadron. Who's gonna win? Well, RNG will certainly be lacking on that fact, because RNG doesn't care. Because the American carrier will always win against a Japanese fighter. They will always win, one-on-one. That's only a one-on-one. The only way a Japanese fighter can win against an American carrier is if the Japanese has 2 fighters against that 1 American fighter. And that gets into more detail with the differences between American and Japanese carriers, because Japanese will have more squadrons than the American carriers, while American carriers have much bigger squadrons than a Japanese carrier, which Wargaming tries to make these 2 types of tech tree line from 2 different nations different. And as a result, all the way until tier 9, the American strike loadout doesn't have any fighters. The Japanese will always have a fighter in every type of loadout, but the American doesn't have it. That is another issue. I just don't want to go into the issue, guys. I don't want to talk about it because there's so much issue to the point that they just need to scrap aircraft carriers and rebuild the game from ground up. They need to redo the foundation. Right now, the foundation of the aircraft carriers are just simply terrible. And here I am. My biggest reason why I stopped playing aircraft carriers is because I get nothing but negativity from them. I get nothing out of them. The reason I started playing aircraft carriers, like I said, is because of the history. I wanted something different, and aircraft carriers, I don't know how many people's opinion about this, but I think aircraft carriers are one of the most beautiful ships in this game. To me, they're as beautiful as battleships sometimes. I really do. I really do believe that, and that's my opinion. And that's one of the things that drives me to play aircraft carriers, because how cool they look. They have so many things going on the deck. They got even a Shokaku. Look at that. I don't know. That's how I feel about it. Sometimes I just like looking at aircraft carriers and the planes taking off and all the cool stuff that's going on the ship. But when there's problems with them, my experience with them and everything about them and how it works and how the anti-air and all that stuff, it's just broken. And I'm just going to keep it that way. I'm going to keep it simple. I'm going to say it's broken. It might sound vague, but like I said, I can spend an hour or 2 about problems with aircraft carriers. I can go days. So why am I upset, and why am I doing a video right now? After being frustrated and upset about aircraft carrier, why did I decide to do a video right now after playing to tier 9 on the American and tier 8 on the Japanese? I spent 5 games with the Essex. This is a ship that I just unlocked. The first 5 games as a stock carrier. When you're a stock carrier, you get stock planes. And with these stock planes, these are not tier 8 planes. I mean, these are not tier 9 planes. These are tier 8 planes. These are tier 9 planes, and it is far away from me because I need 21,000 for this, 21,000 for that, 15,000 for that, and then get the flight control to get something good out of this carrier, which is 26,000. That is almost like 70k, 80k, I don't know what it is, most likely 70 or 60k. That is a lot of XP to grind. And the first 5 games, the 4 games out of 5 was hell to me. It summarizes of what I dealt with throughout playing aircraft carriers, and it was the worst. It was the worst thing I have ever felt before with playing aircraft carriers. Like I said, it was the worst experience playing aircraft carriers overall compared to any other ships. So what happened? Well, I'm gonna talk about one particular game that really hit me, and this is why I'm doing a video about it. In one game, I was matched up against the Taiho. The Taiho has tier 9 planes while I still have tier 8 planes on the ship because I'm a stock Essex. When you have a plane that is a tier below another plane, it's predetermined, that word comes back, it's predetermined that the enemy carrier who is running the tier 9 or the tier higher than your planes will always win in every category. So, my fighters were losing the fighting battle against his fighters. He was out damaging me because he has 3 torpedo bombers while I have only 1 torpedo bomber and 1 dive bomber. And I couldn't do anything else with that carrier. I'm just simply a sitting duck wasting my time sending out my planes to get shot down for no reason. And my team backlashed at me. You know, one thing I learned from playing multiplayer games and any sort of multiplayer games, it's only natural for somebody to yell at you if you kill them. For whatever case, the enemy or the adversary you face, whoever you face, like you kill somebody with a detonation or a devastating strike, there'll be cases where people yell at you. They will be really upset with what you've done to them. That's one thing. I'm fine with the enemy yelling at me if I kill them. But when your team yells at you, and you feel so hopeless at the same time fighting the enemy, how would I really feel? What really happened? Well, my team was upset because my tier 8 fighters was not able to shoot down all 3 of his tier 9 torpedo bombers. And when you upgrade your planes to a tier higher, they always go faster, they have much more armor, so better survivability, and it's just much more difficult to deal with your lower tier planes. So his torpedo bombers are as fast, I think they're faster than my fighter. So I can't catch them, number 1. So my battleship players on my team were upset that I wasn't shooting down enough planes. And another thing that happens in that game, in most cases, was that I was always engaging the Taiho because the Taiho will always bully my fighters. He knows for a fact that I'm tier 8. Ever since they implemented the 0.5.8 patch where they give you the information that the enemy carries what plane they're running, he knows that I'm a stock Essex, and all he did was bully me. And I'm fine with that, even though it's still an issue of how long it takes me to grind with it. But what I'm not fine was that my team was yelling at me, and this was common before the Essex. I had this problem with the Ranger, I had this problem with the Hiryu, the Shokaku, the Ryujo, the Zuiho, the Hosho, Langley, Bogue, Independence. I had this problem all the time. I've seen this scenario all the time. My team yells at me. And World of Warships is a game. The game was designed to have fun. That's what games are designed for. I play video games because I want to have fun. I did not sign up on World of Warships to get yelled at by my team. And that got to the point where I had enough. Enough was enough. I'm done. And what was my team yelling at me for? One guy yelled at me because my fighters weren't spotting torpedoes or the dive bombers or the torpedo bombers or the destroyers. So I wasn't spotting enough for him. Even though my fighters can't win against a Taiho and the Taiho is always looking for my fighters, I couldn't do anything, so my fighters are always busy against the Taiho. And when my fighters are busy against the Taiho has 3 torpedo bombers. He goes sinks one of my battleships, and my battleship teammate was really angry that I wasn't able to protect him with my fighters. And as a result, he yells at me. And for me, I'm frustrated that I couldn't do anything about it because he's a Taiho. He's fully upgraded, and in this current patch, the Japanese carriers are much more favorable than the American carriers for many reasons, which is plenty of problems I can talk about, but I don't really want to talk about it, like I said, because there's just so many problems. So what happens at the end of the game? The guy said that you're the most useless player on World of Warships Bastion, uninstall, and I'm the biggest noob. And also he said, I try, okay? I try to explain. I even explain. Some people don't even explain. Some people don't care. I truly cared. So I explained in the chat with my keyboard. I type in, this happens all the time for the past 4 games with the Essex. I did it for the past 4 games. I said that I was a stock carrier. I only had tier 8 planes, and I'm going against a tier 9 plane. He didn't care. He does not care. He just called me a griefer, called me a noob, called me every insult you can think of. And you thought that was worse. He decided to report me at the end of the match. And this was very common when I play aircraft carriers. People tend to report me because of the way I play aircraft carriers. And remember, there's not many aircraft carriers player out there, so in most cases, I'm usually the only carrier on my team. The most carriers you can have is 2. So I'm always the attention of every game. I get those games, even before the Essex, that sometimes my team would blame me for losing the game. They usually say, oh, we lost the game because the carrier didn't do this. Our CV was useless. They always say in the chat, CV can't do this, CV can't do this. How am I supposed to spot? I can't really do 2 things at once. I can't spot planes, I can't fight his fighters, I can't defeat the torpedo bombers while I'm trying to fight his fighters and spot the destroyers and torpedoes and spot over the flags. I just can't do it. It's impossible. And I believe that guy, in my opinion, from how I feel, was ignorant because I'm assuming he has never played an aircraft carrier. If you play an aircraft carrier, you know for a fact that you're going against a plane that's a tier higher than you. You already know that he's gonna win, unless you pull off some strategy that, like fighting the fighter under your teammate's AA or whatever the case is, but you know you're gonna lose against the enemy who has a higher tier fighter or a higher tier torpedo bomber or whatever it is. This guy, I spent a solid good 3 minutes typing in the chat that he has tier 9 planes, I have tier 8 planes, I can't win the fighter, that's why I can't spot the torpedoes or the destroyers on the flag, I couldn't do any of this. And all he said was that, I'm reporting you for being a poor player or whatever it is. I got reported several times for playing aircraft carriers. This wasn't an issue when I played battleships, cruisers, or destroyers. Nobody really reports me for that fact. But sometimes I do. There are a few times, there are very rare times when people report me for playing battleship because my team was losing on one side of the map and they assuming that due to the fact that I was full health when I just got there, they thought I was just sitting back griefing or maybe just spending too much time taking so long to get there, even though I was playing American battleships and American battleships slow. But when I get reported on aircraft carriers, I think that's pretty common for me. I see it all the time in the chat when I play aircraft carriers. Report the CV for AFK, he's not playing or using his plane even though I'm actually using my planes. Report the CV for playing poorly. Report the CV for not spotting. Report the CV for... Like I said, I had enough. When the enemy team strikes at you, that's one thing. But when your team betrays you, that puts me into a different position. No other ships, like I said, destroyers, cruisers, or battleship, had ever had to go through this. And you thought the problem just ends there on that game. After that guy reported me, guess what? The other player said that some other player, not that same person, some other player also agreed. He said that the CV was useless. So now I'm getting ganged up by my own team that I was a useless carrier. And at that point, I said to myself, why should I play aircraft carriers if I'm gonna deal with this all the time? There was a game, I remember a lot of bad things about aircraft carriers. It's that bad. I remember all the way back 3 months ago, 3 to 4, with the Ranger, when I had the Ranger, the tier 7 American aircraft carrier. One of the destroyers was upset that I only have one fighter. I was a stock Ranger, so I only have one fighter. He was upset that I couldn't focus all the torpedo bombers across the map. My fighter was one side of the map protecting the battleships, and the Hiryu, which was the ship I go against, that's how long ago I remember what ships I was dealing with. The Hiryu attacked my destroyer on the other side of the map. The destroyer was upset, he lost a lot of health, but he was able to survive. He yelled in the chat saying that our carrier is useless, He didn't use his fighter to protect me, even though I only have one fighter squadron. And I picked to protect the battleship because battleships are more vulnerable to aircraft carriers. Guess what he did? He reported me, he yelled that I was useless, and to make things worse, he decided to sail across the map, taking his sweet old time, 5 to 10 minutes, just to get to the back of the map where my ranger was at and try to torpedo me to death. Try to team kill me. Yes. Somebody in the destroyer, a Fubuki. He was in a Fubuki. He was upset that he was getting torpedoed by the Hiryu and getting spotted by him because I wasn't putting enough attention on him. Even though I got one fighter to pick upon many other ships, and I decided to pick a battleship over him. And that game almost got to a point where I decided to quit aircraft carriers. But I didn't. I continued to the Lexington, and now I'm here on the Essex. Here I am, guys. Here I am. I'm here to tell you guys that I am sick of aircraft carriers. I'm sick of being yelled at. I'm sick of being reported. And I'm sorry. And the reason I'm saying I'm sorry is not because I'm sorry because I don't want to play aircraft carrier more. I'm sorry because some of you guys who subscribe to me for my videos, the Hiryu, the Shokaku, the Lexington, and the Ranger, got some comments and some positive rating on it. A pretty good rating is one of my... Those 4 videos are pretty good videos apparently for a lot of viewers out there, since there's not many aircraft carriers video out there. I think 4 of those videos have at least somewhere near 100 or more than 100 views. And people are really interested. They love the way I made aircraft carrier videos. They talk about how I talk about the Hiryu, the amazing stories, the culture of the Hiryu, the Lexington, what I run on Lexington, the anti-air, and all the amazing things that I enjoy doing YouTube on World of Warships. Now, I'm here making a video where it ends because I could not deal with aircraft carriers. And this is why I'm sorry, because I'm doing a disservice to those people who subscribe to me for aircraft carriers. I'm really sorry, guys. For people who watch me for aircraft carriers, I'm truly sorry that I cannot deal with this anymore. And hopefully in the future that they fix this issue. They make aircraft carriers more playable because I'm not enjoying it. It's not that it's boring or it's not that it's fun. It's upsetting. It's very upsetting and psychologically breaks me to a point that I gotta make a video about this. So I'm sorry to you guys who enjoy my aircraft carrier videos, but I'm hoping in the future that I will make more aircraft carrier videos if I ever feel better about aircraft carriers or when wargaming fixes aircraft carrier, which I hope the most. But right now, for me, I'm just not gonna touch aircraft carriers. If I ever gonna touch aircraft carriers, I'm probably gonna play a bot game, which I plan on doing, which is the only way to get something good out of the Essex, because I'm gonna have to grind for 60 to 70k of XP to get those planes upgraded through bot games. There's no way I'm going into a random battle just to get yelled at and reported for playing poorly because I was outclassed by the enemy carriers. And this is another issue, like what was going through their minds that you think you could put a tier 8 plane on a tier 9 carrier. I'd rather have them put tier 9 planes and make the flight control 70k to unlock or 60k, not 26k. But the planes means the biggest difference in the world because I'm basically bringing a tier 8 ship against a tier 9 ship, even though I am a tier 9 ship. But like I said, I'm sorry that was my message. I'm sorry that I failed you guys. I'm resigning from playing aircraft carriers and uploading them to YouTube. And this is not my affect all you guys who don't watch my carrier videos, but I'm just saying to my viewers, my subscribers, who enjoy playing aircraft carriers, who watch my aircraft carrier videos, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to resign from aircraft carriers for the time being until something happens to aircraft carriers or something that I feel like playing back on aircraft carriers. Right now, aircraft carriers are just making me feel so miserable playing, and I don't want to deal with it. So, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next time on World of Warships.